welcome. We have a very unique webinar today on all things AI. I'm not sure if you've heard of that acronym before. It's this new great thing happening in the world. But in all seriousness, really excited for today's session. We have some amazing panelists to talk about how they're thinking about using agents and AI in their companies and how they're thinking about partnering with QAD for that. And we have some exciting sneak peeks of what we're doing and what's coming around the corner. Before we get into it, maybe we start off with some quick intros here. So I'm Ross, CEO and co-founder of QAD. Yeah, we have a killer crew of guest panelists. Maybe we can start off with Amanda, if you want to do a quick introduction.
Yeah, great to be here, Ross. I'm Amanda Mitchell. I'm our senior manager of sales operations at Hootsuite. Been at Hootsuite for a little over 4 years now. Expert in all of our GTM technology.
Amazing. And then Tim, to round us out from the Hootsuite flock.
Thanks, Ross. Tim Bolton. I am Senior Director of Revenue Technology at Hootsuite, and I've been here just shy of about 2 years.
And Lawrence.
Yeah. Hey, Ross. Lawrence Green. So SVP of Sales at a company called QAD Redzone. We're a platform for manufacturers. We've got about 1,500 employees, about 6,000 companies around the world using our footprint. And I've been with Redzone since it was founded. I was part of the founding leadership team here, and we got acquired by QAD in 2023, and the companies merged together.
Amazing. Well, before we get into talking about the details and the technology and use cases, I thought it'd be helpful to frame the why. I think, there's big conversations right now happening of like, how impactful is this stuff really, especially on the field in sales? Like, is this translating to customer outcomes, real sales productivity? And I think kind of what I've seen is gone from experimentation and like more information to this year, it's really been about outcomes and actions, especially everything this spring with, Claude Code and more agentic workflows than more just information and intelligence. There's been this huge shift. So I'm excited to hear from this crew and, your thoughts around what's really kind of driving those outcomes and impacts. So yeah, maybe to start, we can go in reverse order from the introductions. But yeah, how are you seeing, AI developed and tested? And what are some of the, either the positive outcomes or some of the challenges that you've seen from either the adoption or just making its way into customer conversations?
Obviously things have changed a lot in the last 5 to 6 months. If we look at where we were this time last year, I don't think any of us could really sort of fathom just how fast things have changed. And for me, we're now bombarded with so many different options for new agentic tools, and I try and stay grounded that whenever we're looking at introducing agents or introducing new tools, bringing it back to what are my objectives as SVP of Sales. And obviously I've got my internal objectives. I've got to create the environment conditions for my team to be successful and give them the tools to be successful and give them the coaching to be successful. But then obviously from a business perspective, when I'm looking at the tools, does it increase the ARR? Does it increase the average deal size and sales cycle? And ultimately, does it improve the buyer experience as well? So try and sort of bring it back to that. And I think the other thing I've seen is, we're trying to be so quick to put agents in place that sometimes we're missing some of the challenges with the context layer underneath.
Yes.
So I know I've certainly experienced this myself, and I'd be interested to hear Tim and Amanda's take. But where we've sort of rushed to launch an agent, or maybe put Claude Enterprise in place, and then suddenly you realize, well, actually the context stack underneath it, the data that we've got on Salesforce, the structure of that isn't necessarily in the format that we need it. So it's in some ways we're all trying to go a million miles an hour. On the other aspect, I've had to slow down to go faster in some respects, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yeah, I love that in terms of being grounded and splitting it up between what are the internal goals of our company, how can we move faster and make it a better environment for our teams to be successful, but then how does that ladder into what really matters, which is the customer experience and all the good things that come from building for them. But yeah, Tim, what about yourself? How have you seen stuff change and what's working and what's not.
To Lawrence's point, there are options everywhere in all of our third-party tools and within Salesforce directly to leverage AI and agentic capability and co-pilots. And that has helped our reps who are really technically inclined move really fast and get really creative. We've seen some amazing work from some of our more high-tech representatives. As revenue technology, what we're always trying to do is package that into a really outcome repeatable process and framework. So what we're constantly trying to challenge is how to keep it really simple for those reps that are maybe not as technically inclined and not going to be able to do something really creative cross Zapier and Gong and Accord, and something that would be highly configurable and very difficult to replicate. So when we're considering how to build a workflow that has agentic capabilities, we're really looking at it from an outcome perspective and also a scalability perspective. Reps are going to, we have amazing access at Hootsuite to tools like Claude as an example. So we have reps that are really technically inclined, and even those that are not, that are able to create some really amazing assets and workflows for themselves. But we're thinking about it end to end global and how to take the tools and resources at our disposal, make it really repeatable and sustainable for everybody within our organization to ultimately help them prospect faster, research faster, close deals, and find gaps in holes, and then also remove them from the historical nature of just manually maintaining all these disparate tools.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, in terms of like, I think some of the wow moments and the excitement around these tools were from the early adopters and innovators that could do this stuff. And it's like, well, what does that mean for us from sales productivity perspective? Does that mean 10 or 15% of our team gets, twice as productive? And what about the rest of them? And how do we, standardize that for everyone and think about, getting that kind of unavoidable for the rest of the team to get those insights. So that's a really good call out, Tim. And Amanda, what about yourself?
Yeah, just to add, I mean, we're working with, the Lawrences of our organization every day, and really to add to what Tim said, it's meeting them where they're at and making sure the AI that we're implementing is already part of it's like we simplify their workflow with AI instead of entering in a bunch of agents, right? That's really the root of it, to make sure that their workflow becomes a little bit easier, and for those that aren't as technically savvy, they they're like, oh, hey, this is already in there. Great. We introduced an agent to do that. And that's really what it's all about.
Yes. Yeah. I think the theme of what we've been talking about, meeting them where they are and how do we use this technology to simplify things, where I think the default was like new shiny object type thing, add a bunch of stuff that's exciting to us. And then we don't think about the context switching. Like as an ex-seller, I think the most challenging thing was, all the different places to go. That's kind of what inspired me to build Accord in the first place, is how do we centralize all the things we're doing with customers? Are we adding 2, 3, 4 things that seem like, on their own, very helpful, but together is just, much more distracting for the field. Maybe before we move on, anything that's like really stood out as, maybe the most exciting thing that you've tried or you feel like has early indications of working. We could talk about, outside of Accord stuff, anything that's just like really been, wow, we're able to prospect way better into these accounts and know our customers better, or it's helped with, multi-threading or some sort of, very tactical aspect of the role. Anything pop out top of mind that you guys have tested in the last, 6 months or so?
I'll just chime in here, and Bolton and Amanda touched on this, is like, now your ability to be able to distill what your best reps do and then democratize that and push that out and sort of get everyone sort of playing to that standard. We've just expedited that. Yes, you can't, for me, and sort of I don't know about Hootsuite, but a lot of our selling is done face to face, and you're out in the field, so you still need that natural coaching. But the actual ability to capture the things that are working and then roll that out has just been truly expedited. So just the level of preparedness, intelligence question, deal research, way deeper than I think you could ever have done sort of 6 or 7 months ago. I think we're all doing stuff at the top of the funnel as well, where we've got, you know, the outbound agents that are speeding up prospecting, following up on leads that perhaps, you know, previously your BDRs wouldn't have done, you know, going after those opportunities that, that perhaps would have slipped through the cracks. We've seen a lot of positive momentum there.
Amanda, you want to take it from a Hootsuite perspective?
Yeah. I think the expansion, like finding all the people, is something that we've found really exciting. I think, you know, we've got a cord to thank for that. Serving up contacts that we may not already be in contact with, that we should be reaching out to. And then obviously with briefing, based on all of our rich call history, they can then, position messaging based on these previous roles, based on who everyone's spoken to in the past, right? Use those best practices to reach out to everybody that needs to be involved in the deal that we may not be talking to already.
Yeah, I think maybe to bridge those two is the things that we would hope the team would be doing, I think is both easier to do. I think there's far more carrot to it that typically was just stick. It's like, hey, we need to double the people we're reaching out to and multi-thread more aggressively and figure out the executive sponsors and get way more sophisticated about our messaging. It's like, to do all of that stuff is way easier now. But now we can, I feel like the accountability level for that and the need to do that is way higher because your competitors are doing that. Their outbound to the same people is going to be, you know, far more exact because now they can see what's happening with that company. They can automatically read, say they're a public organization. Well, now they can synthesize what the CFO and the CEO just said on an earnings call last week and send it to everyone. Well, now if you're not doing that, and so I feel like the bar continues to rise and rise and rise, which is, you know, I think both exciting as a sales professional, but I think people are feeling that competitive pressure to how do we continue to level up? And I think the pace of that is very different than I've experienced for the last 10 years.
I'll second that 100%. I mean, everyone has to up their game, right? Because your competitors doing it. Competitors that I very rarely saw in opportunities. Now I do see in opportunities. One, because the buyer has much access to the information and can do much more research up front. But in terms of, you know, everyone's ability to sort of, I guess, get ahead of objection handling. What are the likely challenges in this opportunity? What are the likely objections? People are next to savvy on the front, and so your reps have to really increase their game.
Just to pepper in a couple of thoughts as it pertains to different technology that we're taking advantage of. Obviously Accord's partnership with Gong is a game changer, and Gong's agentic capability and our investment in Gong at Hootsuite has proven time and time again to be a force multiplier. We are able to package so rapidly best practices that would typically be someone's secret sauce, but you can now package that secret sauce at scale in minutes. And like the enablement space of like briefs and FAQs are now instantaneous. So there's no longer an excuse of like, well, I don't know what's working. You have a finger on the pulse at all times. And then from my perspective as the head of revenue architecture, I'm constantly trying to think how to make our systems, number one, more aligned and integrated. Number two, how to ensure that the data integrity is at an all-time high. The intervention of Claude and the connectors and that interconnection between the tools helps me move so much faster. I would normally have to outsource for data scrubbing and because of just dirty data over the course of decades, right? And now I can do that in hours myself with a couple of prompts. So the standard for data hygiene, from my perspective, is not even at its peak yet. And we are just barely scratching the surface. And I think the potential for disruption in the enrichment and firmographic space is going to be really interesting to watch play out, seeing how quickly you can mobilize data in current state.
Very, good points. I remember when I was a seller trying to become, you know, elite at the job, trying to surround myself in person in the office around the other top sellers, right? You look at the leaderboards, you look at who's in, you know, when I was in SMB or mid-market, who's in enterprise or strategic. How do I, sit on their calls? How am I just around them to hear how they're doing discovery or pitching pricing? Now that's democratized. Like that's incredible where like every week you could be on exponentially more of those as a seller, which I think is super exciting. And then, like you said, on the other side, the data side, yeah, it's really cool to see what's playing out with some of those providers also having to up their games. And I think
Yes.
there was a lot of commoditization at a certain point there. And now you're seeing like, how else do they help? But yes, like back to Lawrence's point around the context, how do you use the new technology? Well, you need great data. And so I think that becomes more important. So it's kind of this like crazy flywheel of like, the intelligence is getting better and then the data is getting better because of the intelligence, because it can feed into that stuff using Gong or other tools. So yeah, a lot going on. And I think we're at the point where there are really no excuses to not be getting better because of this and not be delivering a better both rep experience and customer experience. But yeah, maybe let's shift gears into some actual product stuff and get really tactical here. I think all of you are relatively familiar to. We recently went GA with our the handful of new agents and wanted to just go through that and kind of hear what excites you about it. What are the potential concerns you might have had thinking about some of this stuff and how it compares to other things you've tried. Well, maybe we can stay on the theme of the conversational intelligence part. One of the things and kind of where we started with thinking about RA strategy and agents was the intelligence. We realized if people already are using call intelligence to drive some of these insights and actions, we need to directly integrate that without a rep having to click a button. So let's, for this example here, let's say this is an early stage deal with Stripe that we're working on. Maybe I had a couple discovery calls and I moved it from, stage 0 or 1 to 2, whatever I consider qualified. Instantly from, if I move that from Salesforce, instantly it'll create the accord and pull in all of that context. So right in here, you'll see internal only. This is not shared with customers. You'll see this meeting intelligence tab. This will pull in all relevant conversations and actually use that intelligence to build out all of the customer facing or internal assets to value sell. So the first piece I think about is from a stakeholder mapping. I hated doing this manually for my deals. This is definitely a requirement for any considered purchase. If you're a salesperson, building out who is who. This just automatically builds a draft now. Before it was cool, like, okay, Accord syncs to your CRM. You can search the people that are there. It'll automatically add those people. Now it's taking the intelligence of like, who's who. It knows Patrick Collison's the co-founder and CEO. It knows that, people even mentioned on calls that are being suggested here fit into certain places. So this is now not just taking our bidirectional sync to your CRM, it's taking into account anything that's publicly available, anything from my, Zoom Info or Apollo or Clay, what I'm using, and any of the conversational intelligence to make those proactive recommendations, which I think is just a game changer. Going back to like, what's the bar for what we do internally? Well, maybe just for key deals, we do this level of detail. Now it's like for any deal, how are you not doing this? Because it's literally making these suggestions for you in real time. So I'll pause for a moment and kind of hear how you guys think about, this impacting what the standards are and kind of, impact on deal execution.
Yeah, I mean, seeing this and putting this to in practice with our teams was crazy, for lack of a better word. The fact that we are, we're kind of taking on that data foundation, right? They don't have to go source all these people. They get one lead, they find one person, and now all of this mapping is done.
Yeah.
I found this to be one of the most impactful agents you all brought to the table. And, seamlessly adding into Salesforce, it just kind of takes things to a whole other level. In addition to that, right, we now have a full map to then transfer over to our customer side of the business, right? Then you have that whole account transfer happen. You know who the stakeholders are, you know who your champions are, you know who to reach out to. And yeah, I just thought it was awesome.
Yeah, it's a good point in terms of the handoff. It's like, okay, a rep's going to put into that random Google Doc or field in Salesforce all the context. It's like, don't even think about that. They just get to look at the Accord. It's going to transfer over to the onboarding playbook or for post sales. One cool thing that I will call out, just not to get too into the features, but one thing I love is it'll take the quote of why they think this person is relevant. So again, this happens all the time. You're going on back-to-backs all day, 6, 7 calls. And did I remember Teresa that was mentioned one off on this call? Joe, my champion, mentioned Teresa and Alan would be super relevant from a security and enablement perspective. And then I don't even remember what am I ever going to go back and listen to that call transcript? I don't know how many tabs open I have of gong calls that like I'm theoretically going to listen to, but you still get to use that intelligence to recommend it here. And then you can quickly click accept. That just also added it to Salesforce. Again, which rep I would never in a million years add a contact to Salesforce in the middle of a deal. Why? Because I can send the next email faster. I can find the next stakeholder. This is doing that work that reps are just never going to do. And you probably don't want them to do manually. So they can go and do that best next step. So again, as an ex-seller who wanted to build something like this gets me really fired up about some of the new agents that are available.
If I could jump in there too,
Yeah.
Ross, if we think about the challenges we're facing with the agentic capabilities, it's like the context switching, the multi-tools. This still keeps Salesforce as our system of record, and it allows the reps to work where they work organically and accords doing the work to backfill that information. It's improving marketing attribution. It's improving so much of the data integrity that we didn't even know we were missing, because the selling capabilities and the marketing capabilities weren't flowing back through to our core systems of record between Salesforce and Marketo. This is a game changer for us.
Yeah, just to build on that, it's exactly the same challenge that we've had, as Tim mentioned there. I think sales professionals are very good at mapping out the people that sign the checks and the decision makers and the sponsors and the champions. But often when you get down to this level of stakeholder mapping, those influencers that we may need later on in the sales cycle to get information for. If we're not getting the information we need up here, we go down a level to come up a level. This for me is a massive unlock, and for all the reasons that Tim and Amanda said, like in terms of, we'd often have some of those people on a call in Gong, for example, but it wouldn't necessarily then transfer over to Salesforce, so they're not in your contacts list. So the fact that is taking, one, identifying those individuals and really pulling them to the forefront, but then as Tim and Amanda said, like keeping our system of record of Salesforce while allowing the sales professionals to stay where they actually do the work in Accord has been awesome.
Excited about it. And again, I think the more you do for the seller, the more, the better it is, and taking that kind of bottoms up approach versus just like, give me your 20 key stakeholders and add them as contacts. Like, how is that going to help you move the deal forward? It's taking them off the field to do some manual work instead of the opposite way around. So shifting gears from the people side, maybe we can go into, kind of the highest level stuff, like some of the why. I think this is something that a lot of reps struggle with, which is like, how do you give them the concept of like the business case to build? And so what we're doing here is basically from a playbook, you're giving it a prompt that is automatically filling out and updating based on the next calls, the information you're getting. So how do we have an always on business case that is going to update based on the new conversational intelligence? I think, I see some companies do an amazing job of this up front. So for example, like, right, Lawrence, I know you guys are obsessed with like the game ready, I think you guys call it. How do we have the best internal account intelligence on this company? How do we start building a POV, a perspective on them? That's great. It's a lot of work, but how do you keep that live and updated all the time? That's just so much work for the seller. But if we can listen to the signals out there in the market and the conversations and emails to keep that updated and fresh, I think that's like a level of diligence we could never ask our field to do before, but now it's just like kind of coming to you. So Lawrence, I'm curious, like, how do you think that impacts kind of the quality of conversations we can have with our customers and kind of, how we can show up to them in our understanding versus, what you were able to ask of the team before?
Yeah, and I think in a world now where, again, AI has really allowed companies sort of from a speed to market perspective, create new products, new competitors popping up. You've all got this same information. Being able to sell the value of your product and really both verbalize and visualize that has become even more important. So drawing people back to what the objectives of the goal are, but also, updating that as we go through, as the sales process unfolds and different people come into the mix, and being able to, I guess, capture that automatically rather than it being in someone's head. So this has been huge, as you said. One of the key things for us that I think both Accord and just AI in general has helped with is that game ready process. So before we go into any call, any activity, that preparation and going super deep on not just the goals of the initiative, but the individuals on the call, what's important to them, and sharing that information as well, and keeping it visual to the prospect. So I think we'll get into, what were the drivers for each of us to move forward with a chord, for example. But for me, keeping this front and center, because often when you get into a sales side, particularly if it's a technical one from us, the goal at the beginning of the sponsor might be, I'm trying to improve the productivity of my factory by 20%. Well, as certain influencers get involved in the conversation, suddenly it becomes, oh, but I need it to integrate to this system and I want it to do this, and then that can become a distraction. And so I like this as always. This is our North Star to come back to. What is our business driver for this project, and keep everyone aligned. So it's been great at supporting that.
Totally. Yeah. Maybe that's a good transition from, yes, you have the big picture. What's the why? What's our point of view on the account? Pulling all that intelligence together. Then it's the steps and getting, the validation done. And that's another piece that kind of ties back to some of the conversational intelligence, making smart recommendations. This is actually an agent where I was like initially very against, as, someone who values the craft of the sales. I'm like, is this going to actually have the right next steps? I think it's worse to have, 80% likely good next steps and recommending them than nothing. And I've been blown away by how Exactus is using that conversational intelligence and what's in the CRM and everything else. So yeah, maybe over to Tim and Amanda. I'm curious how you thought about this and building this stuff into the workflow.
Yeah, I think this is super impactful, and particularly what I appreciated most about it was it uses that conversational intelligence, but then allowing for the rep to accept the suggestion, not to guide you here, Ross, but allowing them to do that. So you still have a human element to the AI. They can adjust, they can make changes, but it just kind of takes everything that's in their head and takes the nuance out of it so they don't miss those things, and they can follow up with other stakeholders that internally that they need to get that information from, that they may have forgotten about, that's going to slow the deal down. But I thought that was a nice touch to allow for them to influence the step, accept it, and then also for the AI to continue to learn from, is this the right suggestion for a next step?
Just to dovetail on that, and Ross, your seller perspective here is exactly what we're considering from a revenue architecture perspective as we're thinking about incorporating AI into the workflow. Is how to balance the art versus science and give the human control and compliance while also serving up relevant insights that are going to help sellers work faster and smarter within their core technology stack. So the ability to accept recommendations is far more seller friendly than simply telling them exactly what to do, and that's where you'll see sellers obviously drop off from leveraging it. There's going to be several sellers that won't take any of these recommendations, and that's okay, but having them there and keeping that momentum and that visualization will help leadership coaching conversations, will help reps stay on top of their tasks and to-dos, and give them the flexibility to leverage AI while not letting AI drive their workflow.
Yeah, I think that was one of our product principles when we were thinking about agents is it shouldn't just be doing the work for them. How does this help them in their deal strategy? How is this making recommendations in the right direction? But they need to own the specific words. Like I'm, a psycho about that stuff. Like I want to use the customer's language and make sure I'm being super precise, like how I'm framing up to things. I would never want AI, without my touch being able to accept and not change the exact wording on a joint execution plan step. Like that's how crazy I am. Or I want to make sure this is the right resource actually that's going to them. I want to make sure, if it's making a change to my executive summary business case and suggestion, I can, reframe it. But that it's getting me 80% of the way there, right? It's pulling the suggested stakeholders cool for me to edit. And actually, Raj isn't, reporting in here. It's actually, on this level, or what's the right, precision there. Maybe that's a good lead into kind of the final piece here, more on the back end versus the seller customer experiences, the automatic updating of the CRM. This is one of the really cool things that we're able to build that wasn't possible before with any technology, where it was a field to field mapping. You needed to be explicit about who's our competitor or what's exactly the right next step. Now it can take all the context from what's happening on a chord across your business case, mutual plan, stakeholder map, and conversations and emails to recommend the updated field with you able to actually edit it in line and accept. And so, yeah, Lawrence, I know, I think one of your lines was, "There's now no excuses to not do this." It's literally giving you the recommendation in the exact format that you need to update the non-negotiable field. So yeah, I'm curious how this kind of changes your perspective on the data and kind of updating CRM side of things.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges that I face, I know it won't be unique to QAD Redzone, is again we spent a lot of time of trying to give the account executives the right tools, and you know, Gong and Accor, and you got Salesforce, and you got other systems feeding into it, but keeping them all updated has somewhat become siloed. So this now has really helped streamline that. You know, one of the particular challenges I had was keeping up to speed on who's what's the, you know, making sure we've got that next step clearly outlined in all the systems, and then also you know, who are the competitors in the opportunity as well, because there might be a different deal strategy based on who we're competing with. But not all of that was getting in Salesforce. It was just dependent on sort of the certain AE. So this is certainly taken away the excuse. And I like the human in the loop element, as we talked about, because then it forces it's the forcing mechanism of reviewing it and making sure, yeah, is that actually the play I want to make? Or it may come up with a suggestion that perhaps the rep hadn't have thought of. But yeah, just keeping that in sync with Salesforce, because obviously that is where a lot of the overall business reporting comes from, as well as really streamline things and taking away that excuse, as you said at the outset.
Yeah, the interconnectivity, I think, is something that I think everyone's really leaning into, whether it's APIs or MCP. It's like, great, these tools on their own were helpful and there was a huge proliferation of them. Does that actually support getting more, like, even with our current stack, do you get more value out of everything you're using today? And so maybe, I know that there was this huge push for consolidation of everything. Well, where did certain players play? Where, you know, are we going headless? Where is it more about just their data versus their user interface? And all those kind of things I feel like are super in flux, but yeah, a bunch of opportunity for people to get more out of their existing stack if everything's talking to the tool as well. And maybe just as we're wrapping up, there was a couple. So we launched about I think it was 6 agents so far as part of this GA, and I would be shocked if we didn't have another 6 in the next 2 to 3 months. But a couple that I'm particularly excited about that I'll do a little sneak peek here. So maybe one, I think everyone's super familiar with MCP server side of things. That's being able to you know, kind of read and send out the context from a core. Now we can do more of like the writing side of things and just more connectivity, which is really exciting. I think one like very specific example that I hear all the time is around knowledge transfers. And so let's say, you know, we'll start top of funnel all the way down. Let's say you did an amazing job on an account, breaking into an account strategy for one of your top, you know, 25 accounts. How do you take all the context that you did in terms of stakeholders, in terms of the business reasons, in terms of the steps, to an opportunity? And then how do you work that over, you know, whether it's 2 months or 2 years, how do we take all that context to the CSM, the account manager? So we built agents that are going to be able to, again, not just write back to the specific fields like, hey, this was the stakeholder, let's put it into this plan, or this was, you know, their business case. How do we use kind of a smarter way of doing that and putting it in the framing for that next team? So obviously the way you're going to frame this from a sales perspective is going to be different from a CSM for a renewal or expansion. So that's one thing I'm really, really excited about, is how do we pull this through the entire customer journey? But yeah, Amanda, I'm curious how you're thinking about that internally, since I know at Hootsuite you're really obsessed over how do we, you know, kind of up level our engagement across, you know, the entire journey.
Yeah, and I think this is, I mean, this will be music to our ears that this agent is coming, right? We're working on rolling out playbooks to our account management team, and I think that'll help them stay in a structure, right? Getting into a renewal structure, exposing expansion opportunities. But the fact that we don't have a solid internal handoff tool, right, or platform, and it's all done ad hoc, Slack, right, checking Gong conversations, but now to have a centralized place for that to happen is going to be key to, you know, maintaining customers.
I'm just going to build on what Amanda said there. When we first purchased Accord, we purchased for what you describe yourself as revenue excellence. It was a tool for the sellers. That's what I thought when I was buying it. And then obviously a key driver for us was improving that buyer journey, getting more predictability and visibility of where we're at in the process, and are we mutually aligned, and or even before the AI agents, being able to just have more context around the deal room, and so they've got all the data they need, and so to improve that sales process and map out those plays. What was really interesting to me was once we went live and other people in the organization started to hear about it, then I had people coming to me saying, well, can I get access to a cord so I can see what's going on with this customer? So it was firstly started with my implementation team for the handover process, so that, again, we were doing it very ad hoc, Amanda, as you mentioned, PowerPoint, things like that, Google Drive, but then everyone that's new that comes into that customer then has to go and find that information. So now it just lives in here and follows the customer journey. And then most recently, our customer success team as well have pulled into this. So we've given a cord access to everyone, our sales team, our implementation team, and our customer success team, so that everyone understands the context of that customer journey, where there are the things that are important to them, where there's opportunities, etc.
It's funny because very meta with a core, like when you're selling something, you want to tie into like the most immediate, biggest need problem. And sometimes think about that whole customer journey can be overwhelming. And maybe there's, the COO the chief customer officer on the existing business, the CRO, often on the sales side, trying to pick your battles and like finding the, one of the more forward thinking leaders to bring us in. And then it's like, okay, now we can see when it's live, how this changes. And I think the big differentiator too is how customers react, right? It's like, that's really, I think, what drives, I think the vision of how do we align the customer experience. A lot of times it's like, how are we coordinating internally? But when you get, when you hear the customer say, wow, it was like, such a great onboarding experience because you knew everything about us. I think it really is the game changer. The last thing before we wrap up, maybe I'll put y'all on the spot. If there was one agent we could build in the next couple months, going into, let's say, September, October, the end of the year, that you think would have a huge impact on, whether it's your sales team, post-sales team, internally, sales leadership, what do you think would be that game changer?
I can take this one.
Yeah, go for it, Tim.
From my perspective, Accord is our full stack product that we, from a prospecting perspective, leverage post opportunity creation. Now, our reps are working diligently once that opportunity is created to do the stakeholder mapping and do a lot of that planning. What I would love to see is a prospecting agent that is more up funnel. So if I think maybe it's a account planning agent that takes the capabilities like stakeholder mapping and helps me look at my book differently, more upstream versus downstream. That'll help me organize my outreach and sprinkle in a bit of research on the account as well, so that I can really structure that AE's point of view going into planning versus just in the execution space.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, does it help maybe prioritize? Does it look at, hey, if these are my top 50 accounts, can it help me prioritize those, do some early research and make it obvious, oh, this week I can work on these 10, have some insights. Yeah, it's definitely been something we've been thinking about. So that's a helpful suggestion. Amanda, what are you thinking?
Oh man, I think Tim kind of took the thunder on that one. That's really what's been top of mind for us lately.
Pipeline does solve all problems. So
pipeline does solve all problems. So yeah, taking that manual research out of it, right? I would say from a technology stack perspective, we've consolidated to Accord, Gong, Salesforce really as our mains. But that research and even some of those hidden signals that we're using other platforms for right now, if somehow Accord could surface up those details, propose
the
up
MCP now, as long as we can talk, as long as they can talk to each other, now you can start to leverage those in one place. Yeah,
exactly. So yeah, I think that'll be super impactful.
Cool. Lawrence, any top of mind from your perspective?
Yeah, loads. And again, I'm there's so many different tools coming to market all the time. It's really easy to get distracted. And for me, I'm of the mindset I do want to sort of have deep partnerships with vendors that are expert in their fields that can cover as much of the the sales process as possible. So as Tim said, obviously there's plenty of top of the funnel tools out there, but the more that that can stay connected and follow that whole process through from sort of initial outreach to initial meeting. I like that. And, you know, one of the tools obviously that we're just about to start trialing is the meeting coaching. So, you know, actually mimicking the meeting ahead of time, who you're meeting with, taking on their personality style, the type like likelihood of objections. So bringing in some of that, you know, that coaching perhaps into the opportunity, so we can see where there's good coaching opportunities throughout, and maybe a prompter, hey, you've got this meeting, let's do the practice call now, and being able to score some of that within the application as well.
Yeah, Lawrence, to add to that, like some messaging, prompting using, right? We've got a lot of rich data. We, you know, acquired TalkWalker last 2 years ago. So all of that rich conversation history and from Hootsuite past lives in all these people we've talked to before and all these levels of people, right? If you could stakeholder map and that it could prompt suggestions and here's some outreach that you could do, that would kind of put everybody into a chord in one place using all of that, data.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about how do we, you know, we did a lot of partnerships on the conversational intelligence side. Do we do the same thing from a, what do they call it, sales engagement, mass email sending side? Can we integrate and like plug in? So say use, you know, SalesLoft or Gong or whatever you're using for that end.
Mm-hmm.
Could it have, hey, for this stakeholder, for this multi-thread thing that we do at this step, could it, you know, pull in that context and have it, you know, we're not going to try to, you know, boil the ocean, but like push that context into that, you know, tool where it's just ready for you. You know, is it in your Gmail or Outlook or SalesLoft? Because, hey, I had this, you know, next step coming up. Here's the pre-read for this, or here's the follow-up. So yeah, it's a great, or top of funnel stuff. So great suggestions. Well, appreciate the time. This was super fun to go through and, you know, kind of jam out on all of these things and talk about how in reality this makes its way to sellers and customers instead of just the technology itself, and appreciate the partnership and support as always.